So what if the places getting millions in your taxpayer dollars had no children at all? Now, under President Donald J. Trump, federal investigators from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and even the U.S. Small Business Administration, they're now zeroing in on Minnesota, not for paperwork errors, not for politics, but for something that's far more disturbing. Daycare centers that appear empty, buildings that never operated as childcare, and yet millions of dollars just kept on flowing out the door. Now, this is not rumor. This is not speculation. This is exactly what happens when emergency money, weak oversight, and a system built on trust collide with people who knew exactly how to game the system. Well, tonight, we're going to go ahead and follow the money from pandemic relief programs to shell daycare to federal suspensions, and finally to why ICE is now involved. If you're struggling with grocery prices, child care costs, rent, or healthcare, and you've wondered why there never seems to be enough help, this story explains a lot more than you think, because while families were tightening their belts, a fraud web quietly expanded in plain sight. Now, Minnesota's leadership, including Governor Tim Walz, they're insisting this is being handled. I mean, even look at Ilhan Omar. She's saying, hey, we're doing the right thing out here. What are you talking about? Federal records suggest otherwise. And when the walls started closing in, the behavior of these operations changed real fast. So stick with me, guys, because once you see how empty daycares became million-dollar pipelines, you're going to fully understand why investigators just made their move and why this story is only just the beginning. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Okay, under President Donald J. Trump, this stopped being some kind of a local compliance problem and it became a federal case. Now that shift matters. When U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement teams align with investigators from the U.S. Small Business Administration, this signals that the suspect conduct, it goes far beyond licensing mistakes or paperwork delays. So here's the part most people are missing. The alleged activity, it touches federal statutes, fraud, false billing, identity misuse, and even potential money laundering, triggering federal jurisdiction. Now, Minnesota is not being singled out at random. It became ground zero because the patterns were just too loud to ignore. Empty facilities reporting full enrollment, businesses changing names overnight while payments continued, claims that don't reconcile with observable reality. So when multiple federal databases start flashing the same anomalies, this is when Washington decided to step in. So this isn't about childcare policy debates or partisan fights. This is about whether taxpayer dollars were siphoned through structures that were designed to look legitimate on paper while failing basic tests in the real world. So federal investigators, they don't move in volume unless thresholds are crossed. And by early 2026, those thresholds were crossed. So what follows isn't discretionary, it's procedural. And once that line is crossed, states don't get to contain the fallout. Investigators didn't need insider tips to spot the problem. They needed open eyes. Facilities listed as daycares sat quietly during open hours. No drop-offs, no pickups, no activity consistent with the enrollment numbers used to justify these payments, and yet the money just kept on flowing in. So take the pattern and then repeat that across Minnesota. A center shuts down, reopens under a new name, and the funding stream resumes. Creative Minds Daycare becomes Super Kids. Signage lags behind, but the check's clear on time. Now, these aren't rumors. They're verifiable contradictions, addresses, payment records, licensing histories, and observed conditions that just don't match the claims. Millions of dollars were paid to properties that function like private residences or sat largely unused. Now that mismatch, this is what triggered federal suspicion. Not the ideology, not media pressure, data conflicts. When services claimed on invoices don't align with physical reality, auditors escalate. When escalations stack, agencies coordinate. The key point is restraint. You don't need assumptions to understand why this drew attention. Empty buildings can't deliver full services. Full payments for empty buildings just don't reconcile. And so once enough of those contradictions appear across programs, the system flags itself. This is how this moved from a state level issue to a federal investigation. So a viewer once told me something that stuck. She said, it felt like they took advantage of me. Now, for years, her Medicare plan quietly overcharged her. No alerts, no explanations, just money leaving her account while nothing changed. That's the common thread in stories like this. Systems that keep on paying out because most people assume everything's fine until they finally look closer. So this is why I partner with Chapter. They review your Medicare coverage side by side with better options, and they show you where costs may be hiding. No selling, just clarity. By the way, it's a totally free call. Now, if you're on Medicare, Or maybe you're helping someone who is on Medicare. Most people are already calling the phone number down below, 909-563-8279, or they're clicking the link in the description down below for askchapter.org/Ron to get answers before more money quietly disappears. This right here, my friends, this is where intent becomes hard to ignore. Because when you stop looking at signs on buildings and you start tracing the payments, a pattern emerges that doesn't resemble negligence. It resembles design. Funds were released based on claims that look compliant on paper. Meanwhile, the reality on the ground never matched up. That gap is the story right there. If you're a parent struggling with childcare costs or a family watching groceries and rent climb every single month, this hits a nerve. The system promised help where it was needed the most, right? But instead, money moved to places that couldn't possibly deliver what they were billed for. And that disconnect wasn't accidental. It relied on volume, speed, and the assumption that no one would slow down long enough to verify anything. So here's the emotional truth. Affordability pressures don't come from nowhere. They're compounded when resources meant for real families are diverted into empty operations. That's why this matters. Not because of politics, but because outcomes tell the story. So when services claimed don't exist, every dollar paid out creates pressure elsewhere in the system. And once investigators followed the money all the way back, bank records, payment schedules, overlapping receipts, the story stopped being about the daycares altogether. It became more about a pipeline that rewarded appearances over reality. That's the piece people feel, even if they don't always see it. Now, to really understand how this scaled so quickly, because this thing scaled real fast, you got to go back to the pandemic response. Anybody remember the CARES Act or, some of the stimulus check money? Under emergency conditions, speed was prioritized. You had programs like PPP and EIDL. They were designed to move fast, trusting self-reported information as businesses, they try to keep themselves alive. Well, the U.S. Small Business Administration, they later confirmed what that speed allowed: abuse. By early 2026, nearly 7,000 Minnesota borrowers had been suspended amid suspected fraud. Now, with roughly $400 million flagged in that state alone, that figure matters, okay? Not because it's shocking, but because it shows continuity. When one funding stream tightened, activity didn't stop. It migrated. Daycare subsidies, home-based care reimbursements, and related assistance programs became the next destination. Same mechanics, different label. The paperwork looked legitimate, but the operations often were not. Emergency systems built for trust became vulnerable once bad actors learned where oversight was lightest. This is the new angle most people miss. Fraud doesn't disappear when it is exposed, it adapts. It moves laterally across programs that share similar verification weaknesses. And when investigators connected pandemic loan abuse to later childcare claims, they saw a single pipeline evolving over time. Now that connection, this is why this case escalated. It's also why federal agencies coordinated instead of acting alone. So this is the moment where behavior changes. When audits begin, when records are requested, when timelines tighten, operations that were calm suddenly scramble. Documents go missing, explanations get strange, and stories start to strain credibility. So here's the emotional beat that matters. Nobody steals paperwork unless paperwork is the problem. So when attendance logs, enrollment files, or even employee records disappear, it's not random. Those documents are the proof layer, the bridge between money claimed and services delivered. If you remove those, you slow investigators down. That's the instinct. So federal agencies like the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA, they see this pattern constantly. Panic doesn't prove guilt, but it's never neutral. Calm operations comply. Questionable ones stall. That's why these moments accelerate cases instead of cooling them off. Now, this is not about dramatic break-ins or sensational claims. This is about timing. Records vanish right when they're requested. Narrative shift right when scrutiny increases. And once that happens, the assumption of good faith collapses. Investigators, they don't need to prove motive at this stage. They document the reaction. And reaction pretty much tells them whether they're dealing with confusion or concealment. And this is why the pressure intensified instead of easing. The walls didn't just close in. They exposed how fragile those operations really were once attention arrived. And this is where a bigger lesson shows up. Now, if your income still depends entirely on constant effort, constantly clocking in, it's fragile. So when systems break, or get abused, you feel it immediately. This is why I built Flywheeler's Income Society around a completely different approach. There's no shortcuts, there's not hype, it's just systems, reinvestment, decisions that keep working even when you're not grinding every hour of the day. Inside this community, we break down ideas, pressure test them, and we stay focused on what actually compounds over time: skills, income streams, and judgment. Now, I don't sell outcomes. I build environments where better decisions become easier to make, especially when things get uncertain. Now, if you're looking for something built for the long run, not just for the next trick, the link for Flywheeler's Income Society is down below in the description. Now, what really pushed Minnesota into federal focus wasn't one case, it was scale. The numbers didn't behave like normal demand patterns. Facility growth outpaced population growth. Suburbs showed higher concentrations of assisted living and childcare sites than dense urban centers. That is statistically backwards. Investigators don't need to walk into buildings to see this. I mean, they map data, facility to population ratios, growth curves, payment density. So when a suburb with a fraction of a city's population hosts more funded facilities than the city itself, that's not innovation. It's an anomaly. Compare Minneapolis to nearby suburbs, then compare Minneapolis to peer states. The divergence becomes obvious. Now, these programs expanded faster and faster here than almost anywhere else. And not because families suddenly flooded in, that was the red flag. So this is how fraud is spotted before interviews begin. Patterns don't lie. When multiple programs show the same disproportionate growth, it signals systemic vulnerability. And once federal analysts flagged those trends, Minnesota couldn't be treated as a local issue anymore. It became a case study. So this is the part that resets attention. This wasn't hidden. It was visible in the data the entire time. And once someone finally took a look at it side by side, the alarms went off. So this is when the narrative shifts from accountability to defense. So as federal pressure mounted, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and state officials, they framed these investigations as political, an attack, a distraction, a manufactured controversy. But that framing only works if people forget one critical fact. The conduct under review predates President Donald J. Trump's current term. Fraud doesn't become political until it gets exposed. Now, before that, it's just tolerated. The programs expanded, the payments continued, the same operators reappeared under new names, and nothing stopped until federal agencies stepped in. That's the firewall. Delay long enough, label scrutiny as partisan, and then just hope fatigue sets in. But the data doesn't care about rhetoric. Timelines don't bend to talking points. When the same patterns persist across administrations, the argument that this is Trump's fault collapses on contact. Federal investigators aren't responding to speeches, they're responding to discrepancies. So here's why this matters emotionally. People struggling right now, they're being told that resources are scarce. Then they learn millions of dollars just flowed out the door uninterrupted through these operations that didn't even exist in practice. That contrast fuels anger, not because of party labels, but because accountability only arrived once outside eyes forced it. And once that firewall cracks, everything behind it becomes visible. Now, what finally removed any doubt was replication. Investigators, they began finding the same structure outside Minnesota, the same setup, the same math, different state. In Washington state, home-based childcare operations reported minimal enrollment while receiving outsized payments: a house, a license, a handful of children, and then hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, this wasn't coincidence. This was a copy-paste model. Once a method works, paper compliance, minimal verification, steady reimbursement, it spreads. Different programs, same playbook. That's why this stopped being a Minnesota headline and it started becoming a federal concern. Fresh geography resets attention for investigators because it confirms intent. One anomaly can be an error, a mistake. 2 can be oversight. 3, across states. This is a system being exploited. This is the line that triggers coordination between agencies because the risk is no longer localized. So this is the part where most viewers have not been shown. Fraud networks, they don't need coordination meetings. They learn by observation. When one state proves a method works, others follow. And once federal analysts connected those dots, the scope widened fast. Minnesota wasn't unique. It was just early to be exposed. Now, a lot of people ask the same question when U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement showed up. Why is ICE involved in what looks like a financial fraud case, right? So here's the answer. And it's actually simpler than most people realize. Once suspected fraud crosses federal benefit systems and touches identity, residency, or even benefit stacking, ICE jurisdiction is triggered automatically. Now, this is not about politics, it's about enforcement boundaries. When investigators see patterns suggesting multiple identities, overlapping benefit claims, or even inconsistent residency information that's tied to federally funded programs, ICE doesn't get invited, they just get activated. And so that's the moment that states lose control of the process. And that's why the panic set in. Because once ICE enters, cases don't stay administrative. They become criminal, federal, multi-layered. The standard of review changes. The timelines accelerate. Cooperation stops being optional. Now, here's the emotional truth that lands hardest. Once federal lines are crossed, there's no quiet reset. There's no internal cleanup. The system doesn't work it out. ICE involvement signals that the alleged activity isn't just costing money, it's undermining the integrity of federal systems altogether. So this is why behavior shifted so fast. This is why narratives changed. And this is why the story didn't fade, it intensified. Because at this point, the question stopped being who failed to supervise and it became who's accountable. So as we move deeper into 2026, this doesn't resolve quietly. Federal investigations don't unwind, they expand. More audits, more suspensions, broader clawbacks. Once agencies like the U.S. Small Business Administration and ICE document systemic abuse, they don't just stop at the first layer. Expect retroactive reviews. Expect cross-program comparisons. Expect cases that were once considered closed to be reopened under new criteria. Now, most importantly, expect scrutiny to spread beyond Minnesota. Not because Minnesota is special, but because it revealed how the system breaks under pressure. For President Donald J. Trump's administration, this becomes a test of follow-through. The initial moves are only the beginning. Now, what happened next determines whether this exposure leads to reform or whether fraud simply waits for attention to move elsewhere. And so here's where we are, guys. This story didn't start with empty daycares. That was just the most visible symptom. The real issue is a system that rewarded appearances over reality for years. And so now that the illusion cracked, the question isn't whether more will be found. It's about how far investigators will go back and how many other programs will look very different once someone finally checks the numbers. So this is why this story didn't end up with empty daycares. It started there. Drop a like, subscribe, share. I'll see you next time.